I'm absolutely delighted to be in Perugia, which even on a rainy day looks a beautiful place to work and live. Thank you for coming. My name's Nick Wren. I've spent most of my career in newsrooms and the last 3 and a bit years working for Facebook as head of news partnerships based in London and having the privilege of buzzing around Europe and meeting many news organizations. First off, I just want to recognize the fact that Facebook has certainly been in the news and in the headlines for some of the wrong reasons over the past couple of weeks. Our CEO has made lots of comments about this and lots of statements about this. We made mistakes, and we're working to make sure that those mistakes don't happen again. We need to work with news organizations as well. We've got a lot of work to do. If anybody wants to know and catch up on all of the statements that we have made about data and privacy, they're all on our newsroom blog, which is newsroom.fb.com. Today, I wanted to talk to you about something which I know is front and center of minds in many newsrooms, and that's newsfeed ranking changes. I'm going to talk about the changes that we have made already to newsfeed this year so far and some of the changes which are coming up. I want to explain the strategy and the thinking behind that, hopefully bust 1 or 2 myths, and also summarize some of the related work that we're doing around news literacy and signals for quality journalism. First of all, going back in time and a reminder that Facebook was built to be a social platform. Our mission is to connect people, and this is the Facebook from 2004, so you can search for people in your class and in your school. There's no video, there's no articles, nothing like you can see now. Newsfeed started in 2006 and very, very quickly grew, not just with friends and family content and posts from friends and family, but also with what we at Facebook call public content. And public content is from a range of journalists, newsrooms, celebrities, commercial brands, sports teams. And that increasingly became a big part of the newsfeed experience. So the goal of newsfeed is to connect you to the people and to the content that matter most to you. And since launching newsfeed in 2006, Facebook has constantly made changes and iterations and tests. At any one given time, there'll be multiple tests going on in newsfeed. But what has remained consistent is what we call the newsfeed values, and these were written a long time ago. It's fair comment that we probably haven't been as transparent as we could have been about telling people what these newsfeed values are. We published them in 2016. They're publicly available now. We often go around giving out big, thick booklets to people who want to know more. So we're certainly not hiding behind these, and we're proud of these newsfeed values. And they've remained the same. So I think a couple of years ago when we put out the newsfeed values and published them, and people saw friends and family first, they thought that it was a big dramatic switch for Facebook. It wasn't. It was a reiteration of what's always been the first value in newsfeed, that friends and family come first. But we also want newsfeed to be a place that informs and a place that entertains, and also a platform for many different voices. So newsfeed looks at many different signals to try and figure out what content it should put at the top of everybody's newsfeed. So everybody's newsfeed is going to be different. We could like the same identical news organizations, but our newsfeed is going to look different depending on how we all interact with the content. I may only look at link posts and read articles. My friend may watch a lot of videos and comment more. So those kind of signals and those behaviors determine what goes up at the top of your newsfeed. Now, a person with, say, 100 Facebook friends could expect to have several thousand pieces of content in their newsfeed that if they had all the time in the day, they could scroll down and see every piece of content from their friends and family that day or from pages which they follow. We know that people don't do that. What they're looking for is a snapshot at the top, and they'll only scroll so far before they run out of time and go somewhere else. So the goal of Newsfeed is constantly to look to get that content which is going to be most relevant to people. Now, historically, we've focused on connecting people with news which people find interesting, and we've not really taken a position on what that should be or what that kind of news should be or any values behind that news. And this year we're changing that, which is a big step for us, and we're focusing on quality news. We want the news that appears in Newsfeed to be of a high quality, and I'm going to talk about how we're going to do that and how we're thinking about that as we go along today. So then we come to this phrase, meaningful social interactions, which you've probably heard. You can also say great conversations for meaningful social interactions. Because what we found is that when people were looking at Newsfeed more and more and spending more time on Facebook, increasingly they were telling us, and we survey them regularly, and they were telling us that they were finding it a lot harder to have the conversations which matter to them around this public content. Most people come to Facebook to connect with friends and family, often friends and family from a long way away. They also want to look at public content, but it's important for them to have conversations. Reminder, we are a social platform. We want to encourage meaningful conversations. And what they told us was that public content was starting to crowd out the other content that they wanted to see. So we made an adjustment in January to optimize for content which has meaningful social interactions, and I'm going to talk about what we mean by that in a minute. We're also looking at how people spend their time on social media, and we looked at academic research which showed that people who go onto Facebook and other social media apps and passively look at the content, just scroll through reading or watching video without interacting with it, tend to feel a lot worse than people who go onto social media and have great conversations and strike up connections with their friends. So above all, we want people to have a good experience on Newsfeed. We want people to, when they log on to Facebook, feel when they log off again a few minutes later or half an hour, however long it is, that that time has been time well spent. So these changes that we made in January, that we announced in January, also acknowledge that, at least for the short term, people are likely to spend less time on Facebook. So we've switched from having time spent on Facebook as a key goal for us and moved to time better spent and time well spent on Facebook. I'm going to play a short video which is going to explain some of the reasonings behind this meaningful social interaction switch, and also start to introduce what we think of by meaningful social interactions. And then I'll give a couple of examples that we've found working with some of the news organizations.
People come to Facebook to connect with the people who matter to them. And over the next year, our team's mission is to help you have deeper, more meaningful interactions with people you care about. We use a process called ranking to determine which posts show up in your newsfeed and in what order, based on what we think you'll be most interested in. A like, comment, or share is one sign that a post matters to you, so posts you're likely to interact with generally get higher ranking scores. Now, we'll also consider whether a potential interaction is between two people or between a person and a page, which are the accounts run by businesses, organizations, and public figures. Person to person will be more valuable than person to page. Connections with people in your network will get the biggest boost because interacting with people you're close to is more meaningful. We're also going to prioritize exchanges that reflect more time and care.
Interacting with people, like having a conversation or reminiscing about things you've shared, is associated with a greater sense of well-being. And the benefits are even stronger when you're close to the person and when the interaction requires some effort. For example, typing out a long and thoughtful reply to a friend's post. On the other hand, just scrolling through your Facebook feed, passively reading or watching without interacting with others tends to make people feel worse.
Over time, we believe people will see more posts from people they're connected to and less content from publishers. We also expect overall time spent on Facebook to go down, but our goal is that the time people do spend on Facebook will be better. Facebook was built to connect you to the stories and people that matter most, so we're going to keep listening to you and working hard to make sure that's what you see every day.
Alrighty, so what does it mean for people who are running pages and admins in newsrooms? First of all, I'd like to acknowledge that the change that we made in January wasn't just a tweak, it was a significant change. And for many people in newsrooms, it was incredibly disruptive. I recognize that. I've been on the other side and seen that. What we've been doing, and my team has been working with newsrooms and going into newsrooms and meeting as many people as we can to explain the changes, to understand how it's impacting their own individual experience, and to give them advice on how to optimize for these changes. So, broadly speaking, the effects can be put into sort of three areas. Publishers who are doing content which generate these great conversations are going to find that their content will continue to do really well on Newsfeed. Conversely, if all you're doing is publishing short videos which are probably not original and don't generate those kind of conversations, are just watched passively, you can probably expect your reach and your traffic to fall as a result of that. So we actually reduced the amount of news content in Newsfeed in this change in January from 5% to 4%. Most people, when you tell them that, are quite surprised that it was as low as 5% to begin with. And you could think, well, 5% to 4% is not that much, but that represents a 20% shift. So for newsrooms seeing on average a 20% reduction in their reach, that is a significant change, and I recognize that. Each publisher, though, is going to have, and probably has had, a very different experience with these changes. And it's worth pointing out that the meaningful social interaction change that we made in January is only one of many changes which impact the newsfeed. Which leads me to point 3. We haven't finished. We have a lot of work to do. This isn't something that we've just rolled out, stepped away, and then finished. We're constantly testing to make sure that this is delivering on its promise, that it's meeting the goals of giving people a better experience on Facebook, and we are continuing to test and to iterate. So I want to show some examples of what we mean, what actually is meaningful social interaction. Well, you saw in the video that we're optimizing posts which create especially that peer-to-peer conversation. So that might appear, for example, on the your left, my right, The Guardian post, where you've just got a very strong thread and replies coming into the comments and conversations happening organically within the post. Or it might be someone sharing a piece of content to me writing about it and commenting on it, and then one of my other friends coming in saying, oh yeah, that's so like you. And again, it's that social interaction between peer-to-peer which is going to drive a lot of reach there. But it needn't be a post. This is a video, an AJ Plus video, and I pulled out this example because it's, I thought they did a really good job of just setting the tone at the top of the comments and having a pinned comment at the top, which does a very effective job of summarizing a difficult story and guiding people into the kind of conversation that it wanted to have around its video. So yes, moderation is going to be important, and having the ability to go in and moderate conversations is always going to be much more effective. But it's an illustration that we're not just interested in like-minded opinions about fluffy cats. We want news on Facebook to be a place where people can disagree, but within the right tone and within the right framework. And done right, as in this case, you have a really robust, interesting discussion between two women on the opposite sides of the world about French politics and race. It needn't be, though, just around Newsfeed. We've seen a huge explosion in groups, as Sarah and Livia were talking about yesterday in their workshop. And groups are becoming a really important place for people to have conversations on Facebook around topics of specialist interest. So if you're a publisher with a very broad remit across politics and sport and lifestyle, but you have real expertise in a particular area, you're going to, done right, get some really strong interaction and conversations going on in your groups. This is an example from the Times and the Sunday Times, who quickly found out that people were utterly confused about Brexit, and that people from both sides of the debate wanted to come together and share information. And they do a very good job of being very open about the discussion, even sharing links from rival news organizations and encouraging that kind of conversation. And they tell us that 2/3 of the people within that group, and at last count there was about 1,400 in there, have a discussion on it at least once a week, which is a pretty high level of engagement. But it needn't be just the big national and international organizations. This is Gloucestershire Live, which is run by the Trinity Mirror, Gloucestershire being a rural region in the west of England. And they started a group for traffic and travel. If you live in Gloucestershire, between probably the hours of 8 o'clock in the morning and 10 o'clock in the morning, knowing which trains are running and which roads are closed and which school buses may be late, may be the most important relevant information for you at that particular time. And they've found great engagement and growth of user-generated content and even news gathering tip-offs by using this kind of group. And then this video. We're increasingly seeing that people are opening the Facebook app with a specific intent to watch video rather than discovering it by accident as they scroll through Newsfeed. We have the Watch product in the United States, which we intend to roll out internationally as a specific home for video. But the Newsfeed algorithm going forward is going to give a ranking boost to video where we can see that people have an intent to watch. And when they come back and watch again, so if you've got a series or a regular recurring video and people come back and watch it, that's a strong sign of intent and relevance for people. So I talked about our shift towards favoring quality news. So as the amount of news within Newsfeed comes down to leave more room for friends and family content, which people tell us that they want, we want the news that is within Newsfeed to be high quality. And this is the shift that we're making in terms of putting a value on the news that people see at the top of their Facebook Newsfeed. So we're in the process of making some more changes, ranking changes, which will roll out country by country throughout the rest of the year. And I wanted to update you on some of these. So we started a ranking change to uprank trusted sources in the United States, and we are now on the verge of doing it in Europe as well. And how this works is a survey. We survey people regularly on Facebook, and we ask them if they recognize a particular domain. And if they don't, we ignore that data. But if they do, we ask them a follow-up question and just very simply ask them how trusted on a scale of 1 to 5 they feel that domain is. An important part to make about this, because we're well aware that that could be gamed, is the ability to look for broadly trusted sources. And by that I mean we put as much emphasis on sources where people who don't follow that page nevertheless recognize it as a trusted domain. So for example, if your news organization is trusted just by your fans and trusted by nobody who doesn't follow your page, you're probably going to do less well with this change than an organization that has solid trust from their fans, but also recognition from people who don't necessarily follow that page. I've tried to summarize what's a very complex methodology in 1 minute, but I hope you get the sense of where we're going on this. Now, is this perfect? No, and we'll continue to look at how we can improve. I think we had a difficult decision when we made up our mind to put more emphasis behind trusted sources. We could have chosen those sources ourselves, which I think would have spooked a lot of people in the industry. We could have appointed a a third-party body and stepped aside from the process, but that still wouldn't have got round some of the questions about objectivity. Or we can ask the people who use Facebook and the people who look at news to make the choice themselves and to make that decision themselves. So it's not perfect, but we feel it's a pretty good solution at the moment. And as we roll this out, we're going to monitor to see how it goes. The second area that we want to optimize for is news which people find informative. We did some work on this back in 2016 in the US, again when we were asking people story by story to rank it in terms of whether or not they found it informative. We haven't decided on the methodology going forward for this year yet, and when we do and when we disclose that, we can update you. But that's one of our strategic goals. And the other area that we want to optimize is where people have expressed a preference for local news. We want to give them more local and community news. This may not be just news from local newspapers or local TV stations or radio stations, but it may well be. But it may also be community news or news from other local bodies like police forces or school boards or other people with a big stakeholder interest in a local community. So we started this change in the US at the beginning of the year, and now we're rolling it out globally in all languages. So where people have expressed a desire for local news, they're going to start seeing more local news in the top of their news feed. We've also been thinking about how we can create better spaces within the newsfeed experience for people who like local news. So I wanted to show you something that we're doing in the US. We started this in 6 cities, so this is a sample newsfeed, and then all of a sudden you find a unit which offers you the chance to drill down into a lot of local news. So it's not just articles and stories. It could be news, it could be information, it could be comment, it could be groups, it could be a range of stuff. So we started that in 6 cities in the United States. We got very strong feedback. And we've just in the past few days expanded that to another 25 cities in the United States. Well aware that local in the United States means something very different to local in Germany or the UK or France or Italy. But our intention is to see how we can scale this kind of experience for people who want more local content within their newsfeed experience. So if you're the admin and you're in your newsroom, what should you do? And there's some basic guidelines and tips, and we'd be happy to talk through this in more depth if you want to come and visit us in our room around the corner throughout this conference. But broadly speaking, articles which prompt this meaningful social interaction, these great conversations, are going to do well. I recognize as well that that might be a trade-off between you posting as many posts and spending more time moderate. Generally speaking, the more that you can go into the comments, the more that you can thank people for their time, thank people for their question, and where necessary, answer it, the more loyalty and the more of these conversations, meaningful conversations, you're going to build up. I often say that I think newsrooms underestimate the loyalty and the power it can have when someone takes the time and effort to write a comment or ask a question, and they get an answer back. And when they get an answer back from the journalist, name-checking them, thanking them, that instantly builds loyalty because they tend to share it with their friends, they tell their friends and family, and they come back again. So there may be a trade-off between the amount of content that you post on Facebook and the amount of time you spend moderating the posts that you do. I would suggest that's probably a good trade-off to make if you have to make that decision. Everyone that we speak to now is really focused on their audience, but knowing what your audience wants and talking to your audience, using different ways to talk to them. You might want to experiment with a group, you might want to build out particular profiles of journalists with special expertise. We can help you with those kind of decisions. And what not to do, and I'm sure nobody in this room does it, but as we uprank quality news and news which people find really informative, we're downranking low quality news. We started this work last year by looking at low quality pages or content which took people to pages full of low quality ads or content which deliberately withheld information or misinformed people in the headline and the summary. And we're continuing to downrank that, we are downranking what we call these kind of different kind of baiting. I mean, broadly speaking, you know, do you like cats or dogs? Smiley face for dog, frowny face for cat. You know, using your action buttons, for example, in ways which they're not meant to be used. Again, we can chat to you during the week about this if you've got specific questions, but as we step up our work to downrank poor quality content, we're now looking for these not just in English, but in Spanish, in Arabic, in French, Italian, and German as well, and we'll continue to expand that work. Finally, before I take questions, I wanted to update you on some of the related work that we're doing to give people stronger signals about the news that they see. We know that news literacy is a really big area, and it's an area that we've been working directly with news organizations, researchers, academics, and other stakeholders in the industry over the past year. So I want to give you a few examples of the work that we have done and some of the work that we're continuing to do. For example, people told us that they wanted to find more breaking news from news organizations that they trusted, but found it very hard to do, especially since Newsfeed is not stacked chronologically. So it's very hard to discover breaking news within Newsfeed. It's a poor experience. News organizations also said that they wanted the ability to better label and to give a signal to a news or to their readers when a story was breaking, so that they can come back and expect more. So we're starting with a very simple breaking news label. At the moment, it's a breaking news label, but if it works, and so far the indications are pretty good, we're finding that people are much more likely to go and engage with a story when it has the breaking news tag on, relative to that same story without the breaking news tag. So it's breaking news at the moment. Who knows? We could expand that to like developing story or analysis or comment or other indicators. We also know that people will make a decision about whether news is trustworthy often on the brand. And we know as well that we've not done a particularly good job on making brands, news brands, prominent enough on Facebook posts and within Newsfeed. Last year we experimented with a number of ways to allow publishers to upload their logos, for those logos to appear bigger, and also for a logo to stay with the story when you share it with friends, which sounds kind of obvious, but we just hadn't done it before. And we needed the discussions with the news organizations to prod us and lead us to that direction. So this is a particular example within Instant Articles, but we're looking at other surfaces to make logos and brand awareness more prominent. And this was borne out in the Reuters Institute report, I think, last year, which said that recognition of brands within social media needed to improve. We've also been looking about how we can show more depth to people who are particularly interested in a story. Again, this is an example from an Instant Article from The Economist, where we're showing off a recirculation unit and allowing people to drill much deeper down into some of The Economist reporting. But again, we're looking at recirculation units and signals that when people want to go deeper on a story or get more depth, they can do. And we've also started testing a button on the top right-hand corner of posts, which allow people to find out much more about the publisher and the author. So these indicators, again, have come about in collaboration with organizations like the Trust Project, but also directly by talking to newsrooms. And we want to give people signals about the credibility of the news organizations and the journalists that they're looking at. So what happens is that when you tap on the information button on the top right-hand side, you get a layer of content behind it. And it starts off with a Wikipedia entry about the particular organization, so you can tell its history, its headquarters, what exactly it is. This particular example is Vox. Conversely, if the news organization is not reputable or even not a real news organization, you'd see nothing. You also get more about the publication, and that can be related stories to show, again, the depth of reporting that's been done by that particular organization. We're experimenting with author tags, so you can find out more about that particular journalist and their expertise and the kind of stories which they've done. And also, where relevant, indicators from the Trust Project about here's a link to our corrections policy, or here's a link to our publicly stated editorial policy. So again, we want to give these signals to people about the veracity and the credibility of the news organizations that they're looking at. And we've also been expanding our work with third-party fact checkers. We started this just over a year ago in the US, and since then we've expanded it to Germany, Netherlands, France, Mexico, and Indonesia, and we've got plans to expand it to other countries in Europe and Asia very soon as well. And the third-party fact checkers help us debunk stories which they think are not all that they're made up to be and are disputed. And they do that by putting a related article underneath so that people can see that the AP or whoever it may be has alternative reporting on this story, or a direct debunking story when a story is disputed by fact checkers. So again, we want to give signals to people about the kind of content that they're looking at, but it has to be a collaboration. I don't think we would do this very well ourselves. We need to work with the industry to get this right. There's a lot of information there. We have many resources. We probably need to figure out ourselves how we give you a better portal so that we can have all this information in one place. Meanwhile, I'm going to throw a few links at you. So first of all, the Newsroom blog, newsroom.fb.com, is where we have all our Facebook statements and publicly facing updates. The media blog at mediafb.com is specifically our updates, product updates. We share best practice, case studies around media, not just news, but around entertainment and sport as well. If you want one more email, you would be very welcome to subscribe to our Europe, Middle East and Africa team, Media Partnerships team weekly newsletter, which just again summarizes any updates, product updates, announcements, and again where we have them examples of best practice. And also, if you want to have an ongoing discussion with us and also your peers, you can join the News Media and Publishing group on Facebook, which is an open group for people in the industry. And we discuss things and we invite other people to discuss topics of interest on that as well. So those are some resources which I hope will be useful to you. We'll be around during the week if you have any more specific questions, and I'd be happy to take any questions from the audience right here, right now. If you want to speak in Italian, that's fine. I've got this funky headset because my Italian is not good, but otherwise, hopefully I can take English. And there are some microphones as well, so we'll start there, and then we'll go to there, and then we'll see where we end up. If you could just say your name and where you're from, that would be great. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Tara Mulholland, and I work for the social media team at CNN. So these changes are all very interesting, but it feels like for a lot of people in the social publishing world and a lot of people that I've spoken to here, it's just the latest in a lot of instances of Facebook shifting the goalposts very dramatically when it comes to what kind of news it favors and what kind of news ecosystem it wants to create. So for instance, like the prioritizing of video, of live video, of instant articles, and now of groups and meaningful conversations, which are all very resource intensive. They take a long time to do well, and then when it seems as though more news outlets have mastered what Facebook wants, then the parameters shift and a lot of hard work is essentially down the drain. So is there going to be greater kind of focus going forward on like building a kind of, giving news outlets opportunities to build a solid strategy that isn't going to be taken away at short notice, and on greater openness with what actually works, because there's a lot of caginess around how algorithms and ranking are affecting a lot of publishers right now.
Yeah, very fair question, very fair feedback. I think in the past, Facebook has built products and then said, hey, we've built something really great for you, come on, join. And then we're sort of like, hey, we're going to do something else now, and we need to recognize that newsrooms need more time to adjust and to choose which product or which service is right for their audience. So that's fair. I think where possible and where we can, bearing in mind we're a public company and we can't always give the kind of notice that we'd want to give, we want to be as transparent and open as possible about the changes. We want to give people as much lead time. The newsfeed ranking changes are going to be ongoing and going to be rolling. I would love to tell you that we're going to reach some stability, or that your reach is going to go here and it's going to grow 5% over the next year. I can't say that. It's going to go up, it's going to go down. It will differ. I have to be honest about that. You mentioned a couple of other, you mentioned groups and instant articles and live. So with live and instant articles, we're pretty pleased with how those products are going. I mean, we're not talking publicly about them because they've bedded down and newsrooms either like them and use them a lot, or they've decided they're not for them and they've moved on, and we haven't needed to do as much product development on them. But we are seeing instant articles continue to grow. Had some high-profile dropouts, so that's fine. I think if you've got a really good mobile website, you probably don't need instant articles, but we've got more than 10,000 publishers on them, and that's growing now. Facebook Live, I think, is a great way to get meaningful social interactions, because it's a product that was built for the comments and the reactions to be just as important as the video that you watch. But your broader point about being able to plan and strategize around Facebook, I absolutely get. So we want to be as transparent and give as much lead time as we can. We may not always be able to do that, but where we can, we will. And I think you probably need to think about placing bets about which parts of Facebook, Instagram, Messenger, or other social media platforms are going to be right for you and your audience. I fully accept that for most newsrooms, it's going to be impossible to go all in on everything that we do. So I think there are going to be different solutions for different business models, or different solutions for different editorial and audience growth models. Does that help? Thank you. There's a question on this side.
Hi, yeah, Jim Lauterbach from VidCon.
Hi.
You guys have spent a lot of money investing in AI, or the beginnings of AI and machine learning, to impact how things work inside of Facebook. How much of the algorithm and the way it picks stories these days is directly influenced by code that humans create versus kind of the black box of a machine learning algorithm that's just out making decisions on its own? I mean, where do you see the sort of line between the human-driven aspects of the algorithm and a machine learning or AI version of it?
Yeah, I mean, I can't give you breakdowns because I simply don't know the ratios, but you're right to identify that AI is important, is going to become even more important. And when you think about the discussion about what makes a meaningful conversation, how can we tell whether somebody's comment is it may disagree, but it's a positive contribution to the debate rather than hate and abuse, right? So put very simply, and the video I showed earlier on alluded to this, longer comments tend to be more constructive, not necessarily agreeing, but generally speaking, not always. Longer comments tend to be more thoughtful. People are taking the time rather than just, you're an idiot, no, you're an idiot. So at a very simple level, that's one area that our machines can look at as they're looking to elevate stories which have generated these positive conversations. So AI probably isn't my area of particular expertise, but if you happen to be at Gen in a couple of months, we may have something for you. There was a comment, sorry, a question right behind you. A meaningful question, I'm sure.
Let's see. My name is Ingrid. I'm from Austria. I'm a journalist and book author. And I wondered about the negative side effects of algorithms which favor interaction. So the newsfeed so far favors the number of likes, the number of comments, the number of reactions, the number of shares. And now the magic word used by Facebook is meaningful social interactions. But it still seems to me that the number of comments is an extremely important aspect there. And when we look at which posts get a lot of discussions and comments, it's often trashy journalism, it's often misinformation. So how do you get around that? How do you manage to not have the same negative effects there?
Yeah, good question. So I think where previously, we'd put a lot of ranking behind all areas of engagement, likes, shares, comments. You're right to identify that the meaningful social interaction change is looking at comments. Shares are still important and likes are still good, but the comments are the driving factor behind that. So first, this is only one ranking signal, so it's one of many, but you're right, we need to get it right. And I think that 6 months from now, if what you're seeing is just a growth of, as you put it, poor quality conversations around poor quality content, we've probably not got this right. So we need, we're an open, broad platform, and one of the Newsfeed values is that we want Newsfeed to be a platform for lots of different opinions. So there needs to be room for softer stuff, happier stuff, fluffy cats. Fluffy cats are important. We don't want to get rid of fluffy cats. We also need to make sure, though, that for people who want to talk about Brexit, for people who want to talk about Syria, climate change, US politics, really weighty, important discussions, they can do so in a way which is going to be better and more meaningful than they can now. We've got a big task to figure out how we make our platform as safe as possible. And some of it is machine learning and some of it is humans. So first of all, we need to make sure that the comments and the discussion is within our community guidelines. And when it's not, we need to make sure that people know how to report comments which are offensive or hateful. And then once those comments are reported, we need to do a better job at taking them down faster, and where necessarily penalizing the people who've posted those comments. So we can do that by better machine learning, but also by increasing the number of people who are working specifically on making our platform as safe as possible, which a number of employees will be going up to 20,000 around the world in different languages doing that soon. So, I wish I had a very easy answer for you and say, come June we'll have fixed this, but this is an ongoing, very difficult issue, which is a high priority for us. And a very good point to raise. Thank you. Yes.
Ginko Kobayashi, Japanese journalist, but I've been using Facebook in UK because I live in UK. And can I ask you a very, very basic question? I'm the only person who may ask you this basic question, which is, what do you define newsfeed? Because newsfeed, I think the word implies that the Facebook decides what kind of news stories I want to read, and basically irrelevant of what my choice or consent, Facebook sent me some news stories on my timeline. But I have been using Facebook for years, but I have never seen such stories in my timeline. And then you say each one's timeline is different, so I don't know. But I do read news feeds, as you mentioned. Like my friends read some Guardian news, and she makes a comment, and then I can read that because she uses that story into her timeline, as I always do. But other than that type of news feed, I've never seen Facebook chosen something for me. But is it very popular in other parts or in other people's timeline? That's the question. And secondly, do you pay? Does Facebook pay to those news companies to use their stories in the timelines?
Yeah. So the first question, and I'm just being given the 5-minute signal. So the first question is, if a news story comes in your newsfeed, it will be because you've liked the page of that publisher, or your friends like it and have commented on it or shared it. If you see you shouldn't be seeing news that you don't like and your friends don't like. So if you do, that's thrown me and I need to know about it. The second one, no, we don't pay for people to post on Newsfeed. There's a question here, and then there's one over there, and that may be time. Or we'll try and get three in. Let's try and get three in. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I'm Galina Timchenko. I'm from Medusa Project, Latvia.
Hi.
Could you please tell a little bit more about video news ranking? You know, it seems to me I feel some kind of trapped because, you know, to my point of view, media industry spent maybe millions of dollars to produce very short news video to boost their outreach because they thought that Facebook gave top ranking to the short news video. Are there any changes in your preferences or maybe in ranking of news video? Thank you.
So the video news that will do best in Facebook now is video which generates a great conversation and starts connecting people around that particular video. And also video where people express an intent to come. They might go to your page, go to your video tab, or if you're doing a series, they'll come back and watch the next one the next day.
It's mission impossible. It's impossible to return and to find video you want to see one more time.
I'll acknowledge that. It is hard at the moment, which is why we're building out the watch tab. If you've got time later on, I'll pull out my phone and show you what that looks like, so you can get a glimpse of the kind of product that we're looking to build and roll out internationally. But it's a fair question. And there were two left on this side of the room.
Good morning, Vincenzo Tiani. I'm a freelance journalist. I would like to make a question about hate speech online and on Facebook too. So basically, I think that the more AI you use to tackle with hate speech comments, the more people you will need, real people you will need to you know, the main problem is that there are so many exceptions in every country. At least I think about Italy, like a copyright exception, a right to comment, the right to parody, the right to I don't know, let's think about nudity in the art that many times Facebook has basically put down. But all the people that you hire need to be very well trained. And it's something very different to do. Also, you really need time. You just can't have 1 minute, 2 minutes to decide if a comment or a post can stay there or not. So, are you thinking about it? Because it's really, otherwise will be just censorship. And if you have 2 billion clients, let's say, and if there is time enough to also to respond, because I can say, no, my comment was legitimate. Are you thinking about it? Thank you.
So no, it's a huge issue, and you know, I'll be honest with you. When I see horrible comments on Facebook, it really depresses me, and it makes us more determined to figure out how we do it. So we have clearly stated community guidelines. We have teams who are trained to be nuanced with local language and local sensitivities in many parts of the world to respond to those reports. We need to make sure that people are aware of how to report stuff which is outside of those community guidelines, and we need to get it seen quicker. Now, those people, and it is seen when it's reported, it's seen by a human. They will make a decision about whether that content is within or without our community guidelines. They don't always get it right. But if you can imagine just the sheer volume of numbers that we're dealing with, we're going to make some mistakes. So we need to strike the right balance. And so far we've been trying to do this globally. And as you can imagine, that's very challenging because the cultural nuances in Sweden are going to be very different to the cultural nuances in India. which is why we hire people locally and hire people with that local knowledge. Have we got it right yet? Absolutely not. Have we got more to do? Yes. And some of it is, as I say, is machine learning. Some of it is design, so that people can have buttons. Some of it is giving admins better moderation tools, better filters, the ability to mass delete comments, perhaps, or quickly zap or delete people who are troublemakers. So these are all areas that we're actively working on. And I'm being told I'm out of time. If someone didn't get to ask a question, I'm going to kind of loiter at the back for a bit. But thank you very much indeed. Thank you.